B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Wednesday, February 27th, 2019. Michael Cohen didn't sing, but he did warble a little bit as he gave some long-awaited testimony today before the House Oversight Committee. And in preparation, Trump and his allies have been just relentlessly attacking Cohen and his credibility, claiming that he is such a liar that whatever he says about the liar-in-chief cannot possibly be true. And this water was carried by members of Congress on the Oversight Committee, by one guy who we'll mention in a moment, who issued a not-so-veiled threat that Cohen was going to have mistresses revealed if he continued to press with his testimony. And this has all of the marks of a kind of mob investigation. Thugs versus thugs. And while Michael Cohen is not the most brilliant lawyer in America, he appears to have more hustle than brains. I do believe him. There is no reason to reject some of the new information and the evidence that he presented to the committee today. And what was most telling, and I'm going to review some of the testimony here as we cover this, but I was really impressed when at one point Michael Cohen pushed back to Mark Meadows and his other interrogators like Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio. This is the guy who was the wrestling coach at Ohio State, and he has survived allegations that he ignored the complaints of members of his team about sexual harassment and sexual abuse that was going on the Ohio State athletic campus. So we have a real sordid picture here. And I don't want to make the Democrats out as saints, but the Republicans really showed that they are willing to do anything to protect this corrupt president. And what became very clear is that we have a very strong case of obstruction of justice, violation of the campaign laws in the hush payments that were structured, and Cohen was involved in getting the payments to Stormy Daniels and to Karen McDougal to keep them hushed during the 2016 campaign. And this comprises a very clear case of obstruction of justice, and you can add on the firing of Comey and other episodes that are rationally and reasonably linked to the president's effort to suppress this whole storyline. So Cohen provided some very damaging evidence. He has copies of checks, and I'm looking at them right now. One is dated March 17th of 2017. The other, August 1st of 2017. The first check is signed by Donnie Jr. and the Weisselberg, the paymaster at Trump Co. And the August 1st check was signed with the unique and egotistical signature of Donald J. Trump himself. What this shows is that despite the fact that he claims to have recused himself from the family business and put Donnie Jr. and Eric in charge while he's busy rescuing America, well, it shows that he was intimately involved in the hush payments and the reimbursement of Michael Cohen, who fronted $130,000 to keep Stormy Daniels in line. So this is clear evidence that Michael Cohen, under the direction of Donald Trump, and Trump did this both before he was installed as president and after, he was supervising the cover-up. That is obstruction of justice, and it is an impeachable offense. It's also a felony. And in many respects, the details become secondary. We know, based on Cohen's clarification today, that American Media Incorporated, the owners of the National Enquirer, and I mentioned in passing yesterday, AMI is 1/3 owned by the Public Employees Retirement Fund here in California. tabloid profits, pay pensions. Anyway, AMI got stiffed by Trump, who is notorious for not paying his vendors, his contractors. And according to Cohen, David Pecker, the chief executive at AMI, was very angry. Well, I would be too. That's $125,000. And we heard allegations how Trump puffed up his balance sheet to make himself look wealthier than he might be. And it does appear that before you inflate it all, that Trump is worth $3 or $4 billion. He rounds that up to $5, and then he adds just an arbitrary $4 billion for the value of his brand, the Trump name and the gold letters and his hairdo, I guess. And so he plays fast and loose with the financial statements, some which were used just to make him look good publicly, others were used to secure bank loans, and that could include fraudulent activity. It certainly appears to be that to me. So Cohen has also hinted that federal prosecutors are investigating unspecified criminal allegations involving Trump that have not yet been made public. He did clarify under oath he has never visited the Czech Republic, which contradicts a claim in the Steele dossier that people have been chewing over for, well, ever since the dossier surfaced. And I wasn't there. I don't know if Cohen was there. I have been to Prague once, but he claims that he has never, ever been there. When asked by Congressman Peter Welch, Democrat of Vermont, did Trump pay other people to kill stories? And there was one, a $15,000 payment, to find out if a Trump Tower elevator operator knew anything about a story that Trump had an illegitimate child with an employee. And Cohen said he doesn't believe that story is true. So one of the things the Republicans did, including Jim Jordan, they tried to trick Cohen into contradictions. So, for example, at the time, we are told during the transition period after the election, before the installation, Michael Cohen was angling to be either chief of staff or a member of the White House counsel office. But today, he said, I did not want a role in the new administration. I got exactly what I wanted. There's no shame in being personal attorney to the president. And so Jordan tries to twist that not only to a contradiction, but a motive for why Cohen was there lying about Trump today. And so when Cohen turned it back on the Republicans and said, look, I did this for 10 years. I lied, I distracted, I attacked the people who were telling the truth, and I did everything I could to protect a man who didn't deserve it. And he actually predicted that what has happened to him is likely to happen to the loyalists who are standing and taking it for Trump right now. There was also conversation about Felix Sater, the guy who was convicted of a felony, who was cooperating with the FBI as he worked for Trump, selling condos and laundering cash from Russia. And Sater is clearly a problem for Trump, who has since claimed, I barely knew the guy. And we know that is flatly false. So the testimony I find fascinating. It supports my belief that Trump is guilty of obstruction of justice, that we don't need anything additional from Bob Mueller to begin impeachment proceedings. And Rachel Maddow keeps floating these ideas that there are rogue prosecutors in Manhattan's Southern District and that they want to indict Trump, despite the generalized claim, which is not a fact, that a sitting president can't be indicted. So this goes kind of in circles. And the bottom line for me is that unless Democrats are willing to call this impeachment, not just maximum investigation, not just, going after this, that, and the other thing that will embarrass Trump, I believe that until they really pull the lever and call this impeachment, that Trump will just continue to ignore it, deny it, and tweet to his base, lies that they lap up like a cat likes milk. And here was Trump, thousands of miles away, in his summit with Kim Jong-un, and somehow he found time to trash tweet Michael Cohen. And Cohen said that he talked to Trump in a kind of code, that he understood the code, and that Trump knew he understood the code. Quote, Mr. Trump didn't directly tell me to lie to Congress. That's not how he operates. In conversations we had during the campaign, at the same time I was actively negotiating in Russia for him, he would look me in the eye and tell me, there's no business in Russia, and then go out and lie to the American people by saying the same thing. And Special Counsel Mueller has noted that Cohen's false claim that the project discussions concluded in January of 2016 was an attempt to minimize links between the Moscow project and Individual One. That, of course, refers to Trump. And so this is pretty strong testimony, while it is not quite conclusive, right? Because coded conversations cannot be used, I think, as witness testimony. Oh, and here's one of the tweets from Trump in Vietnam. Referring to Cohen, he was just disbarred by the state Supreme Court for lying and fraud. He did bad things unrelated to Trump. He is lying in order to reduce his prison time, using Crooked's lawyer. Referring to the fact that Cohen is being represented, apparently, without a promise of payment by a guy who used to be close to the Clintons. He, to my knowledge, never directly represented Hillary. Here's more, quoting from Cohen. To be clear, Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it. He lied about it because he never expected to win the election. He also lied about it because he stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars on the Moscow real estate project. So these are interesting claims, and I heard Rush Limbaugh all wound up as I was driving into work this morning, and he was trying to build a contradiction between the testimony of Cohen that they didn't expect to win and testimony that he gave to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the former head of the Democratic National Committee, that Trump would do anything to win. And Wasserman Schultz used her time to try to just load the record with Russia hacked the DNC and claims that Trump got a tip through Roger Stone, and Roger Stone on a speakerphone is said to have told Trump, I just got off the phone with Julian Assange. Well, there is no evidence that Roger Stone ever talked to Julian Assange. And he is a known bullshitter. Trump loves to receive bullshit, especially when it fits his expectations. And so we don't know that to actually be true. And here's the rub. Cohen dates his conversation where he picked up the idea that Trump had advance tips on when WikiLeaks would release emails. But a Republican member of Congress, I think it was either Massey of Kentucky or Amash from Michigan, they said, well, look, the word was already out in the middle of June that Julian Assange has Hillary Clinton emails, and they're going to be released. There's also a lot of confusion because we don't detail which emails are being discussed. There were tens of thousands of emails that were released through the State Department in a process that was intentionally slowed by the way the Clinton team supplied the emails back to the State Department, and then they were released under pressure from Jason Leopold and his Freedom of Information Act lawsuits. And there is a lot of conflation of the State Department emails with those that were received by WikiLeaks. We still don't have evidence publicly that the DNC was hacked for that purpose by Russians who then delivered that contraband to WikiLeaks. That is unproven, but taken by fact, as fact by most of our corporate media outlets. And get this, Max Boot, the recovering neocon and a never-Trump Republican, he wrote a piece at the Washington Post today outlining 5 felonies that Trump has committed if Cohen's testimony is to be believed. One, conspiracy to defraud the United States. That's related to the emails and the exchange I just described to you. Number two, lying to the FBI and the Justice Department. Number three, suborning perjury. Trump encouraging Cohen to lie to Congress. Four, violating campaign finance laws. I agree with that. The issue there is that the money that was paid to Stormy Daniels, the money that was advanced by the National Enquirer, those are indirect, in-kind campaign contributions. And they are also can be construed as loans to Trump that were not properly reported on his disclosure statements. So this is a steaming pile of shit. And pardon my language. But that's what it is. Where's it going to go? Are the Democrats just going to hope to continue to inflict 1,000 cuts on Trump and hope that he bleeds to the point that he can't stand up anymore? What is the end game? And I don't think the Democrats are clueless. I think they're just wrong. I think they know that impeachment is the constitutional remedy to this situation. But they fear that it'll fall short in the ultimate vote in the Senate to remove Trump. And there is a risk in that you can create a victim mentality, a martyr frame for Trump. But given the evidence before us, this man is so corrupt, he is arrogant, he continued his corrupt behavior. He's not even a good criminal. And the Democrats are content to continue investigation and let him stay on as president with damage inflicted every day. And as I've said repeatedly, impeachment takes momentum. You cannot predict the outcome at the outset. But I believe there is a duty to proceed. Now, the threat against Cohen that was tweeted last night came from Matt Gaetz. He is a Trump loyalist, a Republican from Florida, and he basically used an age-old tactic of trying to intimidate Cohen by threatening to embarrass him with information. Do your wife and father-in-law know about your girlfriends? Gaetz tweeted at Cohen. Maybe tonight would be a good time for that chat. I wonder if she'll remain faithful when you're in prison. She's about to learn a lot. Now, I haven't been able to monitor the proceedings all day. I'm taping it at home. I'll catch up tonight. But I've heard nothing that suggests that any Democrat or Republican asked Michael Cohen about extramarital liaisons. And if they did, they should have been gavelled out of order because he's not on trial. He is there to provide testimony about Trump. And the efforts by Republicans to turn this into a circus and to use it to undermine and, in the technical legal term, impeach the credibility of Michael Cohen, they end up with feces all over themselves. So Trump has had a meeting with Kim Jong-un. We don't know the outcome. I don't have any official statement that has been released because of the time shift across the international dateline. We're going to find out about this at least a day behind, and we may not find out the real details because of the way Trump operates in these one-on-one meetings. But I will say that last night, actually it was Monday night, I just caught up with it last night, Rachel Maddow went deep in calling out Trump because at the first summit with Kim Jong-un, he agreed unilaterally to end the troublesome U.S.-South Korea war games that were occurring multiple times each year. And it's well within his authority to do that. It's something that I support as a trust-building step. And it may prove to have been a useful step if Trump comes away with some framework with Kim Jong-un to officially end the 1950s Korean War and use that peace treaty process to move forward on whatever disarmament they are able to agree on. Every day I pause for a second to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. People like, Marvin Rasmussen, Paul Karsh, Susan Luis, and Emery Safak, who just renewed an annual subscription. Thank you, Emery. I appreciate everybody who supports me, and you can do it too. All you have to do is drop by peterbcollins.com, find the menu tab, click on Become a Subscriber. Then you're on the sign-up page, and in seconds you can choose a level of support that's comfortable for you. I still have bonus book copies of Dr. Justin Frank's Trump on the Couch, and I'd love to send one to you with a new annual subscription and your mailing address in the continental U.S. Yesterday, I reported about the escalating tensions that have turned into an escalating conflict between India and Pakistan over a February 14th terrorist attack, as it's described, in Kashmir. And we've seen an exchange of fighter jet attacks. Pakistan conducted a raid where they say they didn't cross the Indian border, but they launched missiles into India. And India responded by sending 2 MiG fighter jets into Pakistan. One of those was shot down, and an Indian Air Force pilot is now in Pakistani custody. And there are videos that have surfaced of the pilot fending off a mob of people who were then restrained by Pakistani soldiers. And Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, is in a hotly contested election coming up, I believe, in April. And it appears that his hawkish position may actually backfire on him, as the Indian people appear to be alarmed at this quick escalation of military action and the loss of 2 warplanes and 1 pilot so far. In Australia, the jury reached a verdict before Christmas, but it was just announced yesterday that Cardinal George Pell, the most senior Catholic cleric ever convicted of child sexual abuse, was in fact convicted, and he is now trying to angle for a sentence. And his lawyer didn't help matters today, as he tried to downplay the seriousness of the offenses of child abuse. The lawyer describing it as a plain vanilla sexual penetration case where the child is not actively participating. Now, this is pretty disgusting. Now, I was not I wasn't at the trial. I haven't seen great details about the testimony of the actual crimes that Pell is accused of and has been convicted of. But the judge, whose name is Peter Kidd, was clearly offended. He saw the cardinal's behavior as callous, brazen, shocking conduct. He did have in his mind some sense of impunity. How else did he think he would get away with this? There was an element of force here. This is not anywhere near the lower end of offending. And then he said this wasn't a trifling sexual assault. Nothing is to be gained by comparing different forms of sexual abuse of children. I guess he still the cardinal has a real sense of entitlement. Speaking of sexual abuse, we have a new report from 2 federal departments that a total of just under 6,000 reports of sexual abuse by children who are held in U.S. custody in immigration lockups have been reported in the last 4 years. When you break it down, it's just about 200 allegations of sexual abuse by staff members, over 800 allegations of children sexually abusing other children, and 19 cases of sexual abuse of the children included adults who didn't work at the jails. So this is clearly a problem, and it is part of the really gruesome gulag of American detention facilities for adults and children. We have 10 of them here in California, where our state attorney general, Javier Becerra, former member of Congress, he ordered his staff to inspect these 10 present and former facilities. There are a couple of county jails that have been shamed into dropping their contracts with ICE. But in some of these holding cells, people are locked up for 22 hours a day. They have trouble accessing medical and mental health care. Translators are not available. And the abuse stems from the manner in which they are held without oversight, and without anybody advocating for their best interest. And the worst facility in California is the James A. Music facility, which is in Irvine, California, where people have been held for an average of 812 days. These are supposed to be temporary holding facilities. Britain's Guardian newspaper, which occasionally does credible reporting, I don't want to write off everything they do, but it's very clear that they are stoking the U.S.-led effort for regime change in Venezuela. Here's their latest headline: infant mortality in Venezuela has doubled during the crisis, UN says. Now, one of the things that is not spelled out in this news article is that the real reason that there is a medical crisis and a healthcare crisis in Venezuela is because of our sanctions. But when this is discussed, when this is reported, that is kind of excised out of the story. They want to blame Maduro, the socialist government. They don't even mention the drop in world oil prices that precipitated the economic crisis in Venezuela. And it's this kind of yellow journalism that promotes U.S. intervention, including possible military intervention, that is a deep, deep problem. And I want to recommend to you the latest piece on Venezuela by Kevin Gosztola at Shadowproof. And he reacts to Bernie Sanders, his public comments, and then what he said in the CNN town hall on Monday that I criticize Sanders for. And while it is clear that Bernie Sanders is opposed to military intervention in Venezuela, he is using language and spin that suggests that the Maduro government is illegitimate, that the election was tainted. And Kevin Gosztola breaks it down and shows that the claim of election, illegitimacy is not accurate. And that, in fact, the opposition party boycotted the election that they now say is tainted. And here's an important comment from Gosztola. The cynical effort to restore democracy in Venezuela does not merely serve corporations and the billionaire class. It holds huge rhetorical value in Republican efforts to box in Sanders and other Democrats who promote popular democratic socialist policies like single-payer health care, free college tuition, and a Green New Deal. And this divide over trying to tag people as socialists is clearly something that Sanders is trying to dance around in dealing with the issues related to Venezuela. And speaking of those socialist policies that people like me think are great, the Democrats have introduced the Medicare for All Act of 2019 under the signature of Washington State Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and Debbie Dingell is the co-author of this bill. Now, it's got a long way to go, and it will face many hurdles, including how to pay for it. And the way we pay for it, that no Democrat has advanced yet, is we cut the Pentagon budget. But they're afraid to talk about that. In Chicago, voters have rejected the idea of extending the Daley dynasty. William Daley was and also ran in a primary that included 12 or more candidates. And 2 African-American women, including one who is a lesbian, will run off on April 2nd to determine who becomes the next mayor. Former prosecutor Lori Lightfoot is the openly gay woman, and Toni Preckwinkle is she runs the Cook County Board, which is part of the Democratic machine, and that probably gives her an advantage in the April 2nd runoff. Across the bay from me in Oakland yesterday, a man who's only 23 years old was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. His name is Amr al-Haggagi, and he was sentenced to 188 months in federal prison, and I believe he is another case of a framed so-called domestic terrorism suspect in this country. And I've put up a link to a podcast I did last year with a local reporter named Darwin Bond Graham about a range of cases here in the Bay Area, including al-Haggagi's, where there was a paid FBI informant in the picture, and I view those as very suspect prosecutions and convictions. The Supreme Court has told the state of Alabama that you cannot execute a man with dementia who cannot remember his alleged crimes from 1985. And it was Chief Justice Roberts who joined the alleged liberals on the court in a 5-3 decision, sat out by Brett Kavanaugh, who was having a brewski. The architect of the election fraud in North Carolina, McCrae Dowless, has been charged in Wake County in connection with misconduct related to absentee ballots. Now, to be clear, these charges go back to 2016 and the primary in 2018, not the cliffhanger general election last November, where they are still investigating the fraudulent use of mail-in absentee ballots. And a couple of quick ones before I wrap up here. The Justice Department lost its second court challenge to the proposed merger of AT&T and Time Warner. The Justice Department opposed it at the behest of the president, who was trying to spite CNN. And that's not a good reason to block this merger. There are plenty of other reasons, but nobody's listening to me. John Oliver on his HBO show on Sunday night and the New York Times, in a series that they've just started publishing, are exposing people who claim to be psychics, especially those who intervene in murder cases and claim they can find the perpetrator. And this, I think, is a welcome move. There's a lot of bullshit that gets pumped out by people who claim to be able to analyze astrology or read people's emotions. Here in San Francisco, following the full legalization of cannabis, the district attorney has announced that more than 9,000 convictions for pot-related offenses will be expunged from the records of those individuals. And finally, we have another Monsanto Roundup trial in a courtroom here in San Francisco. And federal judge Vince Shahabra is making moves that certainly favor Monsanto. I don't want to say he's in their pocket, but he has threatened to sanction and shut down the attorney of a cancer patient for violating his ban on talking about Monsanto's widely known influence on government regulators and cancer research. He lectured Amy Wagstaff and threatened to fine her. You've completely disregarded the limitations that were set upon you. If you cross the line one more time, your opening statement will be over. If I see a single inappropriate thing on your slides, I'm shutting you down. And this is the case of a 70-year-old Santa Rosa man who says that his exposure to Roundup has caused cancer. And the lawyers for Monsanto, now owned by the German company Bayer, say, nah, it's just a vanilla variety of cancer. He could have gotten that anywhere. It's certainly not our Roundup. Glyphosate is safe, and blah, blah, blah. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it far and wide. You'll find it on YouTube. And I'm still Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.